Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we are going to be discussing the most surprising player from every single NHL team and your favorite NHL team so far this season. Now we are a month into the NHL season and we've seen a ton of surprises and shocking players so far this year, exceeding expectations or failing absolutely miserably. But who do I see as the most surprising player on every single NHL team, and who's the most surprising player on your favorite NHL team as well? Watch till the end for the complete rankings and every single pick, and make sure that subscribe button if you are new. 60% of the people that are watching are not subscribed. If you like hockey, this channel is the place to be. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I seem excited throughout today's video, just know these are one of the most fun videos to make on the channel, so keep that in mind throughout the rest of the video. But we're going to go through every single division and every single team, of course, and let's just start out with the Pacific Division and the Anaheim Ducks. Why not? They're a team that's had their fair share of surprises, but in my opinion, the biggest surprise and quite frankly, the biggest disappointment has easily come from Max Comtois, a player who took a big step last year in 55 games, got 16 goals, 17 assists for 33 points, but this year has been dreadful. 9 games played and 0 points on the season. This is a player that is playing okay, but I thought took that next step into a top 6 forward last year and has failed to replicate those stats, nor really the level he was playing at, which is disappointing because the Ducks could definitely use his goal-scoring presence that, quite frankly, has disappeared so far this year. But hey, they do have Troy Terry taking that next step, so at least there's somebody in his place doing as well as he did last year. Now we're going to move on to the Calgary Flames, a team that's had their fair share of surprises when it comes to the team play and the players, but in my opinion, one of the biggest surprises has come from Jacob Markstrom. Now, I know that Jacob Markstrom can be a good goaltender, he's done that in the past, but I didn't know if he would be able to replicate those final years in Vancouver with Calgary, but so far he definitely has. In 8 games played, has got a .936 save percentage, a plus 2.88 goals saved above expected, and he was at like a .955 save percentage just a couple of games back. He's had a couple of rough ones recently, but I do think if Jacob Markstrom can stay the course and be at a .930 save percentage, the Flames are looking much more dangerous in the regular season and the playoffs as well. But now we're going to move on to the Edmonton Oilers, another team that in terms of the goaltending has been a little bit surprising. I mean, Mike Smith was good last year, so it's not a surprise he's been solid this year, but Mikko Koskinen has been the biggest surprise in my opinion. After last year, I wasn't really sure what to make of him. He had a pretty rough season, and I feel like with him, he was getting to up there in age where he couldn't replicate what he had maybe in 2020, but he's done fantastic so far. In 7 games played, has a .934 save percentage, a plus 4.93 goals saved above expected, which is 8th right now in the NHL. Koskinen's been truly elite and is kind of replacing Mike Smith again somehow, which is crazy to see happening in Edmonton. But now we're going to go to another goaltender who has been massively surprising, but this time on the bad side of things. We're going to move on to the LA Kings, and my surprising pick is going to go to Calvin Pettersson, a guy who I thought should have taken even a bigger step after last year's fantastic season, but so far has regressed mightily. In 4 games played, he has an .895 save percentage and is right now 57th in goals saved above expected with a minus 2.3. He has been awful so far, and we're now seeing Jonathan Quick kind of replace him in the starting net, which is crazy to see after how good he was last season. But now moving on to the San Jose Sharks, another team with a bunch of surprising players. I think Weatherby would have been maybe my second choice, but coming in at number 1 for just how good he's been, I gotta give some massive credit to Timo Meier, who is simply sensational so far this year. Especially last year, I thought Timo Meier was quite frankly flat and disappointing compared to what he could be. We know the skill of Timo Meier is exceptional, and he's finally starting to get back to that level this season. In 8 games played, he has 5 goals, 6 assists, and 11 points. We've seen the Sharks be much better this season, and Timo Meier is a huge part of that offense. Now we're going to go on to the Seattle Kraken, a team that's also had a lot of surprises on the bad side of things in my personal opinion, but one guy that stands out to me has been Morgan Geekie, who in 11 games played has 2 goals, 2 points, and has quite frankly not played all that well. Now, he did get a big goal in that last game versus Buffalo, which is huge. If he can continue that, then he'll obviously be off this list in no time, but from what I've seen so far, he had a great first game versus Vegas, but it's just been rough since then. He was pretty good versus Buffalo, and if we see that continue, I'm hoping that he's able to turn a page, but so far in Seattle, I thought he could be one of the William Karlsson type guys, and so far has been the exact opposite. Now we need to go on to the Vancouver Canucks, who have also had their fair share of disappointment, but in my opinion, the most disappointing player has been Elias Pettersson. Now, the position he's also been put in isn't fantastic. They're trying to put him in a little bit more defensive responsibility, which I don't think is really Pettersson's game, truly at a basis level, and so far this year, it's resulted in bad results. 10 games played, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points. points, he has been fine at best. And I thought Elias Pettersson could get back to that 2020 level where he was simply elite, but that has just not been the case because of Travis Green, but also because of his poor play. But now we go on to the last team in the Pacific Division, and we now go on to the Vegas Golden Knights, who again have had their fair share of disappointments, but easily the most disappointing player of Vegas, and a guy who's made that defense honestly horrible defensively, has been Alex Pietrangelo. Now, obviously, Pietrangelo isn't a defensive defenseman by any means, but this is the guy that, in terms of offense, isn't really bringing that either at this point. In 10 games played, has 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points, and with how awful he's been on defense, you would think that he would compensate that with a ton of points so far this year, but that's just not been the case. Obviously, he's trying to compensate for Stone and Pacioretty not being there, but it's just resulting in bad play on both sides of the ice, which for a guy as big as Pietrangelo and as guys that's being paid as much as Pietrangelo, it's not exactly what you want to see. And Pietrangelo's on the second year of his contract on an $8.8 million cap hit. So if that doesn't change, if Pietrangelo doesn't get back to that strong level that we saw last year, that could be one of the worst contracts on the Vegas Golden Knights very, very quickly. But now we need to move on to the Central Division. Another division kind of like the Pacific that has been all over the place, wacky world up to this point. But there's been a lot of surprises so far as well, like the Pacific Division. But we're going to move on to the Arizona Coyotes first things first in the Central. And my most surprising player and disappointing has been, and I hate to say this, man, but it has to go to Jakob Chychrun. One of my favorite players in the NHL has been booty so far this year. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He has been awful. In 10 games played, has 0 points. And although the defense has actually been at the same level that last year basically brought, I think his offensive impact, especially on the power play, but in offensive opportunities, has pretty much vanished. And I thought that was a big part of what made Chychrun such an effective defenseman, was how good he was defensively, while also backing it up with strong offensive play the Coyotes needed. But that has just not been the case this year, and it sucks to see from one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Now we're going to go on to the Chicago Blackhawks, and I mean, you could pick basically the whole team at this point. Even though I didn't see them being a contender, I saw them making the playoffs, and I think the most obvious answer has to go to Marc-Andre Fleury as the most surprising player. Even though I didn't think he was going to be amazing for Chicago, I didn't think he was going to win another Vezina. I did think he was going to be a pretty strong player, but in 7 games played, he has an .886 save percentage, a -601 goal saved above expected, which is second last behind Carter Hutton on the Coyotes. That's not exactly where you want to be, Marc-Andre, and yeah, the Blackhawks have definitely suffered because of it. It's crazy to see, though, Fleury choosing to go to the Blackhawks and not retiring. It's kind of what has to happen. I'm sorry, Fleury. I'm sorry. But now going on to the Colorado Avalanche, my most surprising player has been a guy that I've criticized in the past because of being overpaid, perhaps, and not living up to the contract he had. But we're going to go to Colorado's pick, and we're going to go to JT Compher, who has been just exceptional so far this year. In 9 games played, has 5 goals, 4 assists for 9 points. And even though I don't see that type of production continuing in the place of guys like McKinnon and other places like McGranton being out, a guy like JT Compher has come up in a bigger role and has been pretty fantastic so far, which is great to see. He was a guy that I just thought production-wise was not where he needed to be in past seasons, but it's seeming like that 3.5 or whatever it was is finally coming through with it. Now we're going to go on to the Dallas Stars, my favorite team in the NHL, and you know what? I have to criticize my favorite team. That's just what happens. So we're going to go on to a disappointing player here, and my surprising player / disappointing player has to be Roope Hintz. Now, I do want to say this right now. I do think Hintz is still playing decently, but the production and the finishing has just vanished this season. In 10 games played, he has 1 assist for 1 point. And compare that to last season where the man, every single game he played, even when he was half injured, was just a god amongst men. He was unreal for the Stars and was one of the main reasons why they were a competitive team. This year, though, that is definitely not the case. Hoping that production, though, eventually comes. Now we're going to go on to the Minnesota Wild, another team that's been kind of all over the place this season. They're a very weird team so far, but I think one of the main reasons that they have been so inconsistent is some of the depth, and my most surprising player is actually going to be Jordan Greenway, a guy who last season I thought was pretty solid for the Minnesota Wild, but this year has kind of looked a little bit lost in my opinion. 7 games played, 2 assists for 2 points. He kind of feels like a player that's just going to get traded eventually away from Minnesota. It doesn't feel like he's truly fitting there either, and it's just a weird situation where he doesn't get the most ice time, but when he has played, he just hasn't been impactful whatsoever. I'm hoping that continues because I'm a big Greenway fan, but it seems more and more likely that that production won't continue in Minnesota. But now we're going to go on to the Nashville Predators, another team that's had a ton of surprises so far. I think Tanner Yurna is a, or however you pronounce his name, I forgot completely. Sorry, Tanner. He's been fantastic so far. But one guy that I see as as majorly disappointing, who I thought was going to be a big part of this offense going forward, was Ilya Tolvanen. Now, obviously, he's still young, but in 10 games played so far, Tolvanen has 1 assist for 1 point. I don't know what's going on in the Central Division Finnish wingers, but both Roope Hintz and Tolvanen have been pretty inconsistent this year. But Tolvanen's another guy that I thought was going to be huge for them after the great season he had last year, and that, like Comtois, like Hintz, has been the exact opposite. But now we're going to move on to the St. Louis Blues, a team that's been just on an absolute roll so far, and good for them after the last couple of inconsistent seasons, but a big reason because of that strong play has been Vladimir Tarasenko being the absolute man out of seemingly nowhere. Tarasenko so far this year, 9 games played, 4 goals, 7 assists for 11 points. After asking for a trade this offseason and seeming as good as gone, Tarasenko's come back to his team, come back after injury, and has been an absolute mad lad. It's crazy to see, though. It seems like he's back to his prime level play. His skill is through the roof still, and he's able to create plays a lot more confident than he has in the past couple of years, which has definitely led to big results so far this year. But now we're going to go on to the Winnipeg Jets, another team that's been all over the place this year, missing players due to COVID protocol, and just kind of being a wonky team. They've still been pretty good, and a big reason because of that is one of the most underrated players in the league right now in Andrew Kopp, who continues to kill it right now. In 9 games played, he has an amazing stat line, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. He took a big step last year and is even better this year, which is great to see from a guy that I thought a couple years ago might be a career bottom sixer. But now we're going to skip over to the East, and we're going to move on to the Metro Division, a division with their fair share of surprises and disappointments, but mostly disappointments. But we're going to start out with an actually good surprising player here, and honestly might be the most surprising player in the entire NHL so far this year. We're going to go to the Carolina Hurricanes, and I'll be lying if I said anybody else other than Freddie Andersen. Freddie friggin' Andersen has been on a different world so far this year, and is playing the best hockey I have ever seen him play. In 8 games played, has a 1.50 goals against average, a .949 save percentage, and a plus 9.8 goals saved above expected, which is right now first in the entire NHL. I think Freddie Andersen took that Lee situation to heart and is trying to make them pay as much as possible after his handling with the injury, all the inconsistencies there. It's good to see Freddie Andersen get back to an amazing level. Now we're going to move on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, another team with a lot of surprises and disappointments, but in my opinion, the most surprising player has been Jack Roslovic and his just poor and inconsistent play this season. In 9 games played, has 3 assists, 3 points, and has just been awful on even strength. And this was a guy that took a big step last year, I thought, after the big Patrick Laine and Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, was looking like the best player of that trade last season, but so far has been easily the worst. I mean, Patrick Laine on the same team has been much more effective, and I feel like that's a big problem for Columbus. Roslovic was a big revelation last year, and he needs to get back to that level. Now we're going to go on to the New Jersey Devils, another team with a lot of inconsistencies so far this year, but one guy that struck me a lot this season has been Andreas Johnsson, who, if you ask any Devils fan of the past couple of years, would tell you how bad he's been for them, but this year has seemingly taken a next step out of nowhere. In 8 games played, has 4 goals, 2 assists for 6 points, and has been awesome on even strength, which is so much different from what we've seen in the past. Now it seems like we're going from great surprising to disappointing to great surprising to disappointing, and we're going to continue that trend. Going from a great surprising player in Johnsson, we now need to go to the New York Islanders, who have been struggling so far this year, and I gotta say, a big reason of that has been Matt Barzal's lack of really any production whatsoever. I don't really see many people talking about this, but Matt Barzal in 8 games played has 3 goals, 1 assist for 4 points. And compared to what Barzal is usually, that's pretty dreadful. And obviously the Islanders aren't a team that's focused on production. They're focused on winning, and that's how it should be. But in Barzal's case, he's usually floating around that below point per game, around point per game pace. And so far this year has definitely been below that. And in terms of the play, he's kind of been showing that too. He's still been pretty decent, but I feel like with Barzal, it's just a matter of time before that finishing comes. But again, that finishing has pretty much vanished so far this year. And that playmaking, again, 1 assist in 8 games played is very uncharacteristic for a guy that's talented like Barzal. Now we're going to go on to the New York Rangers, a team, we're going to go to another big surprising player for the better. We're going to move on to the New York Rangers, a team that's also had some disappointments, but in my opinion, the most surprising player has to be Chris Kreider, who in terms of goal scoring has been pretty legendary so far this year. He has played 10 games, getting 7 goals, 1 assist for 8 points. And I've been a big critic of Chris Kreider's contract in the past, for instance, but the guy has been proving it so far this year. And it's not just the goal scoring. He has been playing amazing and has been one of the Rangers' best forwards this season, which is much needed for how little production there's been from guys like Alexis Lafreniere and Capo Caco so far. But now let's just advance to the Philadelphia Flyers, a team that I kind of struggled with picking a surprising player, but I kind of looked through the point scoring, and although I don't know if this guy will actually continue this production, I gotta give some credit where it's due. Derek Brassard has been a legend so far this year. In 9 games played, he has 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points. I'm pretty sure was brought on as like a PTO or a minimum league contract this last year, and has looked pretty good so far this season. I thought he was a guy that after the Coyotes stints would be maybe a 4th line player at best on some teams, but he's playing pretty solidly so far, and that's good to see the production come his way. Now we're going to go on to the Pittsburgh Penguins, another team that has had just a wacky season so far, missing guys like Crosby, missing guys like Malkin for an extended period of time. They've needed to have some guys step up big, and one guy that stepped up amazingly has been Danton Heinen, a guy that I always thought had potential and seems to have unlocked it in Pittsburgh. So far this year, in 9 games played, has 4 goals, 3 assists for 7 points, and a 3.15 goals, or expected goals for per 60, which is among the best on the Pittsburgh Penguins and among the best in the league right now. This guy is playing spectacular, and I always thought he had the potential to be a solid player, but he's vastly exceeding my expectations, and on Pittsburgh, he seems to have found a clear-cut home, which is great to see. Now we're going to go on to the last team in the Metro. This is a team that has had an amazing season so far, and I'm glad to be eating some crow on them. The Washington Capitals have been great, and Evgeny Kuznetsov has been even greater. Another story that seems to be kind of going underrated right now is just how good he's been. In 10 games played, he has 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points. And this was another guy that could have been traded easily last year and was supposed to be traded this past offseason. That trade never happened, and just like Tarasenko, the man has been lighting up the NHL for not trading for him at this rate. Now, let me know what you guys think. So you've seen some surprising players, you think? You've seen some guys that have exceeded expectations, some disappointing players throughout this video, of course. So you've seen a few surprising players and disappointing players. Well, wait till you get to the Atlantic Division, where it seems like every single NHL team just has one guy that's like, okay, I'm going to be either the most disappointing player or the best player in the league for no reason, and it just happens. So we're going to go on to the Atlantic Division and start off with the Buffalo Sabres. Oh, the Buffalo Sabres. What do they have? They're going to be awful this year. Well, they'll have a winning record, that's for one. But they'll also have Rasmus Asplund, who's been sensational this year. In 10 games played, has 4 goals, 4 assists for 8 points. This was another guy that I thought back a couple years ago, or a few years ago actually, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, had some pretty decent potential in the Sabres system. It seems like was toiling in the AHL for a long time, and I'm pretty sure it was on waivers a couple of times, if I remember correctly, but he's come onto the Sabres team, has been on a top 6 role, dominating offensively, and has been wonderful, which is great to see out of a guy that was in the minors for such a long time. Now we're going to go on to the Boston Bruins, and their most surprising player has easily been David Pastrnak. Now, I'm glad I don't have Pastrnak in fantasy, or otherwise I'd be extremely sad right now with his production. In 8 games played, he has 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points, and he's still playing pretty decent, especially on defense. He's actually playing the best defensively I've ever seen him play, but on offense, the finishing has just not been there. I mean, we compared to Patrice Bergeron, who just got 4 goals the other day. Pastrnak only has 2 goals in 8 games played, which is pretty disappointing for one of the leagues, if not the best, one of the best goal scorers in the entire NHL. Again, in that top 3 conversation every single year. Now we're going to go on to the Detroit Red Wings, and man, Detroit, I mean, you could say Lucas Raymond, you could say a bunch of different guys, but to me the most surprising has to go to Tyler Bertuzzi. I was not expecting him to be this good after that terrible injury he had a year ago, but he's come back on the Red Wings and back in a full way. So far this year, in 8 games played, has 6 goals, 3 assists for 9 points, which just makes it even more sad that he's not able to play in Canada because of his choices, but that's just how it is. He's been fantastic though when he has played, and has been a big part of that Red Wings team. Now we're going to go, oh man, the Florida Panthers. What to say about the Florida Panthers? I mean, there's nothing to say other than Sergei friggin' Bobrovsky is back. He is simply back and at an elite level so far this year. Finally living up to that contract. In 7 games played, has a 1.71 goals against average, a 948 save percentage, and a plus 8.53 goals saved above expected, which is second behind Freddie Anderson in the entire NHL. It seems like Bobrovsky is finally living up to that contract. It's about friggin' time, and the Panthers are so good because of it. That tandem of Bobrovsky and Knight has been wonderful, and Bobrovsky being this good and Freddie Anderson being this good is why I love the NHL so much. It's so unpredictable, and Bobrovsky is a great example of that. Now, I think we should have a moment of silence for Cole Caulfield. Actually, wait, no. Have a moment of silence for me predicting Cole Caulfield to win the Calder Trophy. Okay, have a moment of silence for that. All right, thank you. So that's pretty much it. It's Cole Caulfield. pretty self-explanatory. Now we're going to go on to the Ottawa Senators, a team that's had a bunch of inconsistencies so far this year. They've had some players rise to the occasion. Thomas Chabot not having that great production is a interesting fact as well for the Senators this season. But one guy that struck me so far and has really captured my heart on the Sens once again has been Tyler Ennis, who seems to play his best hockey in the Ottawa Senators organization. So far in 10 games played, has 1 goal, 5 assists for 6 points, and he was great with the Sens a couple years back. Eventually, of course, went away from the team and was still pretty decent, but Ennis has been pretty good for the Sens in terms of offensive attack and even strength play. Just a solid player the Sens have used so far this season that they definitely have used correctly up to this point. Now we're going to go on to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I'll just say this. Braden Point is an 8-point-per-game player, but you want to know who is on Tampa Bay right now? Alex Killorn. 10 games played for Alex Killorn, 7 goals, 3 assists for 10 points. This guy is back to an amazing level and was great last year, let's be real here, and great the year before that, but this year has seemingly been unstoppable. And again, 7 goals in 10 games played for Alex Killorn is pretty amazing depth scoring the Tampa Bay Lightning need with the absences of guys like Coleman and Gaudreau off the team. But now we need to go on to the final team to mention here. The final team in today's video to mention, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who also have had their fair share of disappointments. But I would have said Mitch Marner a couple of weeks ago, or maybe Austin Matthews, but the most disappointing player on the Leafs by far has come from the defense and come with Jake Muzzin. I don't know what happened to Jake Muzzin. I don't know what magical curse or witch put on him in the offseason, but this guy has been awful. One of the biggest stalwarts on that defense over the past couple of years has seemingly evaporated when it comes to speed, when it comes to quickness, when it comes to decision making. This guy has been awful, and the skating has taken a big step down in my opinion. And it's tough to see because he was a guy that was carrying the Leafs defensively at points, especially in the playoffs, and to see him be this bad is not great news for the Leafs going forward, and especially when we get to the playoffs. Muzzin, simply put, needs to be better. But that is going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Comment down below what you agree and disagree with my picks, and who do you see as the most surprising players in the league, and on your favorite NHL team as well. Let me know all your thoughts. Make sure you share this video with your friends. Get it out to anybody you guys know, and click on this card for all my hockey rankings content when I want to play this. I need to go. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.